And you guys couldn't pick better songs. Where did we have this last week? Right here, Miss Ocean? Where'd she go? She left us already. We had it right there. Yeah, that where it was? All right. Praise the Lord. Good to be with you this morning. We're going to go to the book of Galatians. I'm sure you were wondering about that. I have another sandwich in the making coming up. We've had the love sandwich we've talked about. We've had the faith club sandwich. And I think we're going to have the liberty sandwich. It's interesting from in Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 1, you go down to verse 13, you see this bookending, if you will, of liberty. He starts out with that word liberty, and he finishes that verse 13 with liberty. We're going to look in between that, but I'm going to read those verses this morning, and then we're going to focus this morning on verses 7 through 12. Galatians chapter 5, verses 7 through 12. This morning's title is The Amazing Race of Life. I mean, some of those songs we sang this morning have a lot to do with life and what happens in life. And my dad used to say life is like a bowl of cherries. He used to say, you gotta spit the pits out. When you're going through that bowl of cherries, you got to spit those pits out. So for you, life may be something. There's been all kinds of sayings for life. Things like God never promised you. What was that?
Rose garden?
A rose garden? I think that was an old song, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Smooth sailing, but a safe landing maybe. I don't know. There's a couple things like that. Roads rocky sometimes. But in all, if you are a believer, you know that you don't have to run this race alone, right? That's good news, isn't it?
Yes.
So Galatians chapter 5, we're going to read verses 1 through 13, and then we're going to focus on 7 through 12. So stand fast, therefore, in the liberty by which Christ has made us free, and do not be entangled again with a yoke of bondage. Indeed, I, Paul, say to you that if you become circumcised, Christ will profit you nothing. And I testify again to every man who becomes circumcised that he is a debtor to keep the whole law. You have become estranged from Christ. Talked about that last week. You who attempt to be justified by the law. You have fallen from grace. For we through the Spirit eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness by faith. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision avails much or anything, but faith working through love. You ran well. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion does not come from him who calls you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I have confidence in you, in the Lord, that you will have no other mind. But he who troubles you shall bear his judgment, whoever he is. And I, brethren, if I still preach circumcision, why do I still suffer persecution? Then the offense of the cross has ceased. I could wish that those who trouble you would even cut themselves off. For you, brethren, have been called to liberty. Only do not use liberty as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another. Lord Jesus, help us this morning to hear your word, to feast on your word, to ingest your word, so that we can this day again be transformed from the inside out. May your word be food for our soul this morning. We desperately need to be fed by you, by your truth. Change us, transform us, captivate us. Have your way in us and through us. We love you, Jesus. Amen. Praise his name. Well, last week we need to kind of just back up a step, because as you're looking in, going into verse 7, there's this going back and forth that Paul seems to be doing here in his writing. He starts out in the beginning of chapter 5, reminding you that you've been called to this freedom, right? Called to this liberty. That you don't have to be entangled anymore with the bondage of the things of the world. The things of the stuff that tried to take you down. You remember all the stuff. For me, it was the wealth. It was the fame and the fortune, that wanted to take me out. Stuff that I focused on in life, just trying to, be a millionaire by the age of 30, that whole thing. But then Jesus showed himself, revealed himself to me. And on that road of life to that so-called Damascus that I was walking on, Jesus got a hold of me. A couple big angels grabbed me and threw me down, and I saw the light, amen. I saw the light, and Jesus came into my life. So there's this amazing race of life. For some people, life seems to be great. For some, not so great. But we all have this thing. We're all in this thing called life, and we all have the same amount of time in the day. And we don't know exactly when our days are going to end. God ordains all of that, but we do believe and know that He is in control. That's a good reassurance for us. So this amazing race of life. So in Galatians 5, you see that Paul begins that statement in verse 1 where he says, Christ has made us free. And then something happens to those in the church. In the church in particular, Paul's writing, in the churches of Galatia, he makes this mention that we talked about last week about being estranged. We called it last week E-Jesus. This estrangement from Jesus. And Alicia said it this morning that there is nothing, that's what we talked about last week, there's nothing more important than our relationship with Jesus. Name me something that could possibly be more important than my relationship with Jesus. So we talked about this estrangement, about this getting away, about this turning your back on, this idea of withdrawing, this idea of alienating yourself, becoming a stranger, keeping your distance from Jesus, as opposed to having this awesome, intimate relationship with Jesus. We talked about the warnings of estrangement. We saw that in Proverbs 13:13 last week, where we said things like, He who holds God's word as insignificant will be destroyed. So God's word, is it insignificant in your life? Is the word of God, that is your relationship, is it insignificant? Do you go to other things before Jesus? We talked about this idea that there's this choice of estrangement. That in John 6:6, it's very interesting that you see those three numbers together, 666. Revelation talks about a symbol for that, for Satan, for the mark of the beast, right? 666. Well, in John 6:66, many of the multitude who have saw something like 5 miracles of Jesus, who were literally fed by Jesus, who saw the feeding of the 5,000 plus women and children, there was a large group of that multitude who went and chose to be estranged, right, from Jesus and never walked with him again. They walked away. John 6:6 tells us. 666. And then, of course, the manifestation of that whole thing we looked at in Revelation 2 was that we saw this seemed to be this great church of Ephesus who was doing great and marvelous things to grow the church. Yet Jesus said, I still have this one thing against you. You've left your first love. So you began to do things, good and marvelous things that you began to do, even in the name of Jesus, but yet He wasn't your source. He wasn't your strength. There was no more intimacy of relationship, that you weren't doing what you were doing because He was living in the truth, but you were just doing things because maybe it was just the right thing to do. And that tends to wear out, and that tends to lead to burnout. So we don't want to be estranged from Jesus. So Paul marks that out for us there in verse 4. And then he comes back in verse 7 where we're going to focus on this morning. In verse 7, he says, you ran well. You ran well, as if that's a past tense kind of idea. That the church of the churches in Galatia, they had run well. You'd been doing well. We can equate that to maybe when we first get saved. We first enter in a new, fresh relationship with Jesus. And then all of a sudden, maybe some years go by, and like Miss Alicia was alluding to, maybe our devotion time, our focus time, we've allowed other things to get back into our lives. Whereas when we were first saved, man, we just were focused, right? We were streamlined. We were just like laser focused, and nothing was going to get in the way of my Bible study time. Nothing was going to get in the way of my prayer time. Man, I wasn't going to let anything interrupt that kind of relationship. Kind of like with Miss Alicia when we first got married, man, she just could not stop looking at me all the day long. It was awesome. She focused. She always wanted to spend time with me. And then years, and you still do, right? So that's a good thing. The years haven't just passed, and we haven't grown apart, but we've grown closer together. Seriously though, when we first got married, she really didn't like me much. She was afraid. She wasn't sure. She's like, if this Jesus doesn't continue to live inside of him, I'm out of here. So that intimacy continued to grow. And obviously it takes work, you guys know, right? It takes work. You got to have focus. You got to desire and hunger and thirst for all that. The book of Paul says, you ran well, he says. You ran well. Who hindered you, though? We talked about this a little bit before. He says, who hindered you from obeying the truth? See, to not obey the truth is what? Sin, right? To shake your fist in the face of God and his word is sin. So let's kind of look at this amazing race of life. The proposition this morning is pretty simple. It comes out of the book of Proverbs, the book of wisdom. Proverbs chapter 4, verses 10 through 13. Let me read that to you this morning. Proverbs 4, 10 through 13. Book of Wisdom tells us this. Hear, H-E-A-R, hear. Listen, right? Hear, my son and daughter, and receive my sayings. And the years of your life will be many. I have taught you in the way of wisdom. I have led you in right paths. When you walk, your steps will what? Not be hindered. And when you run, you will what? Not stumble. Take firm hold of instruction. Do not let go. Keep her, for she is your life. Wow, that lines up perfect with this morning, doesn't it? Proverbs 4, 10 through 13. It's unfortunate that some theologies today don't line up with this Proverbs. There's a group of Christians who think they're always going to stumble, they're always going to fall. But God's Word says when you run, you will not stumble. And why is that? That's because you have this awesome, intimate relationship with Jesus. We believe you do not have to live your amazing life and continue to live a life of sin. We believe that. We believe in the resurrection power of Jesus. We believe that the same power that raised Jesus from the dead is the same power who can live inside of us each and every day. That same power. We believe that. We believe that. That when you become a Christian, that you just don't receive some kind of insurance from fire, but that you receive the very person of Jesus living inside of you through His Spirit. We've talked about your purpose, to be the house of God. We believe that. So when Paul says you ran well, past tense, what happened? Who hindered you from obeying the truth? What's Paul saying here? He's saying, hey, see the hindrance. First point there. See the hindrance. What is it? Who is it? What is the problem? Who is the problem? What is the trouble? Who is the trouble? With this idea of hindrance. Well, what's a hindrance? First of all, you got to make sure you understand what a hindrance is. Well, if you go back to the old 1828 Webster says it is to interpose obstacles and impediments, to restrain motion. This is a hindrance, to stop, to interrupt, obstruct, to impede from moving forward. See, if we don't move forward with Jesus, see, I don't think, and we've said this before, you can't tread water in your relationship with Jesus. We're either moving forward and more intimate and having better right relationship and growing in Him, or we're moving backward. But there's no treading water in this relationship stuff. In the Greek, it's got two words. In the Greek, to understand this word hindrance, it means to strike back. To strike back. Think about this hindrance. To strike back. To beat back. So let's say you were trying, we've played these games before, I'm trying to think of the name of one of those games, but you're trying to get something back here, and a couple of you run up forward, and there's some of us here, and we try to hold you back, right? We try to stop you from getting, maybe, capture the flag, is that, I don't think we do that in capture. Anyway, it's to hold you back, to beat you back. And in particular, which is really interesting for Paul, because you know some other verses where Paul talks about race, right? The race, running a race in life. This, in particular, this hindering is literally, it's an Olympic expression related to a race. So we're talking about this amazing race of life. This amazing race of life. So it's meaning to come across the course in such a manner as to jostle and throw a participant out of the way. Could you imagine watching a sporting event and see someone running out onto the field to try to stop that person from doing what they're supposed to be doing in the game? Have you ever seen anything like that before? Oh yeah, you can Google the 46 top or 50 top cheaters in sports. And it'll give you this really interesting list all the way back to one of the first baseball games. But think about this. I remember watching this game not too long ago. There was a football game, and this guy was running, man. He intercepted the ball, I think, and he was running down the sideline, and all of a sudden, a coach. Remember that one? You guys remember seeing that one? Coach stuck his leg out, didn't he? Tried to trip that kid. That's a hindrance. You remember a few years ago, it was many years ago now, but there was a couple of skaters. She's number one on the list, by the way, that girl. Who got another guy or two, and they went to see this skater, and they hit her with a stick, didn't they? They beat her with a club or something, tried to break her leg.
Nancy Kerrigan.
Yeah. There's a hindrance. They beat her back. There were some old baseball players who were known for those shenanigans. Coming around second base, stick the old foot out, tripping. Back in the day, I don't have many more, but when we played baseball, we had little belt loops. We used to have to wear a belt when we played baseball. The guys would hold on to their belt loop so to slow them up, to impede them from getting to the next base. A lot of times, there's a lot of things, a lot of examples of that. This idea of running the race. See, in your amazing race of life, can you identify, can you see some of those hindrances, some of those things that try to hold you back, try to beat you back, drive you back in your way of life? Let's think of some other examples. And look how Paul talks like this life as this race. I'm just going to go in order, make it easier for us. Acts chapter 20. Great verse here. Paul reminds us of this amazing race called life. Acts chapter 20. Verse 24. 20:24 in the book of Acts. Paul says this, but none of these things move me. Paul was under a lot of tribulation, a lot of trials were going on, a lot of things were happening in his life. Of course, he was getting it from all sides. They were trying to hinder Paul, weren't they, in his proclamation of Jesus Christ. But he says in verse 24, but none of these things move me, nor do I count my life dear to myself. See, if your life is more important than somebody else's life, that fireman's not running in the building, is it? That first responder's not going in. And that's why we salute our first responders. Because they lay down their lives for others, don't they? And isn't that what Jesus told us as Christians? No greater love has one for another than they would what? Lay down their lives for another. Paul goes on to say, so I don't, nor do I count my life dear to myself, so that I may finish my race with what? Joy. We sang that, didn't we? When I die. Right? We have Jesus. We have joy. In the ministry which I received from the Lord Jesus to testify to the gospel of the grace of God. So Paul has this mindset. He knows. He knows what we feel. He's felt it himself. He has this amazing life. This amazing race called life. Another example of Paul speaking that way, 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Paul's coming down to the end of this statement here where he's wanting to figure out ways that he can reach others with the gospel, how he can reach all men, how some may be saved. And he says in verse 23, now this I do for the gospel's sake, that I may be partaker of it with you. So if you talk about doing something for the gospel's sake, for the good news, you're talking about Jesus living in and through you. He says in verse 24, do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? He says, run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty, thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified. This idea, this amazing race called life. He tells the young Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4. 2 Timothy 4:7. Coming off the last days chapter of chapter 3, giving a charge to Timothy and those others that Timothy is training up. The charge to preach the word, to be ready in season and out of season, to convince, rebuke, exhort, with all long suffering and teaching. And he says in chapter 4, this is 2 Timothy 4, verse 3, he says, For the time will come, tell me if this is not the time today, folks. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, where they will not endure healthy doctrine, healthy teaching, but according to their own desires, because they have itching ears, they will heap up for themselves teachers. They will turn their ears away from the truth and be turned aside to fables. That's the complete opposite of what Solomon is saying in Proverbs about hear, listen, to turn your ear to lean into that and who is speaking to you. Here, Paul says there'll be those who are going to turn away. Those are the ones who are what? Becoming estranged. And as you move into Well, I'll just keep reading. We're going to go to verse 7. Be watchful in all things, endure afflictions, do the work of an evangelist, fulfill your ministry. Be watchful, right? See what's the hindrances around you, right? What are those things that are trying to take you out, trying to knock you down? For I am already being poured out, Paul says, as a drink offering, and the time of my departure is at hand. Look what he says in verse 7. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. And he's what? I have kept the faith. Isn't that so important? That we don't become faithless in our amazing race of life. And there's one more. I attribute Hebrews to Paul. Some do, some don't. But I like to. Because it sounds like Paul. When you read Hebrews, you can't mistake some of the things that he's writing. And look at chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, he says, chapter 12, verse 1 of Hebrews, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And look what he says here, because you'll need this answer for the end of the sermon. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before us endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. See the hindrance. See the hindrance. What is it that tries to entangle and ensnare you? See the hindrance. We'll probably come back to that a little bit. But the next part is, what's the source? If you can see the hindrance and know what or who is the problem, what is the trouble that tries to entangle and ensnare you, and what's the source of that hindrance? Where or who does the problem or trouble come from? Galatians 5, go back to Galatians chapter 5 again. Look at verses 8 through 10. Galatians 5, 8 through 10. Look what Paul says here. This persuasion, all right? This hindrance, right? That thing that is persuading you, that is hindering you, he says what in verse 8? Does not come from him. Look what he's saying there, from him. See the capital H in most of your translations? Should have a capital H here. Does not come from God. That source of hindrance does not come from God who calls you. So quit blaming God for some troubles and trials in your life. Did Job ever blame God?
No.
Absolutely not. He did not. And in all that, Job never, ever sinned. Read the book. It's pretty clear. Through all the trials, through all the tribulations, through all the loss. I got to read it to you because some of you don't believe me, I can tell. I'm feeling this vibe coming from the internet. They just don't believe me. Job. Look what it says. First chapter of Job. Just go right there. Job, there was a man in the land of Uz. Not Oz, but Uz. Uz came before Oz. And whose name was Job. And that man was blameless. Holy. Come on now. Upright.
Yep.
One who feared, reverently, feared God, and shunned evil. Job came before Abraham. Read the history book. Job didn't have a Sunday school class to teach him about Jesus. God spoke. He believed him. God said it. Job banked his amazing life on it. But Job had some issues pop up, didn't he? Job had some things that came up in his life. Job prayed for his kids, prayed for his family. Job had lots of possessions. 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camel, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, a very large household. He was considered one of the greatest of all the people of the East, Job. Then one day, Satan came by. Now let's finish reading first, 5 through 8. It says, persuasion does not come from him who called you. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. What's leaven referring to?
Yeast.
And what's that refer to? Starts with an S. Ends in an N.
Sin.
By vowel. Sin. He goes on to say, I have confidence in you, in the Lord. He says that you will have no other mind. Where's Paul referring to? The mind of what? The mind of Christ he talks about in Philippians chapter 2.
Whoa.
But he, lowercase h now, he who troubles you shall bear his judgment, whoever he is. So Paul's just not saying, well, the devil made me do it. Whatever the trouble source is, where is the source of this trouble? So back to Job now. So Satan came before God. And Satan had to present himself, has to still present himself before God. And said, hey, the Lord said to Satan, where do you come from? Satan answered, this is verse 7 of Job chapter 1.
To and fro.
He said, I'm coming to and fro from the earth, walking back and forth on it, on the earth. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him on the earth. A blameless and upright man. This is pretty much, you can call pre-Old Testament. I mean, come on. A blameless and upright man, one who fears God and what? Shuns evil. Job had no part of trying to sin safely. He shunned evil. Turned his back on any form, any kind of evil. Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Because that's what he's saying. Well, you know, the only reason Job fears you, God, is because you give him good things. You bless him all the time. I mean, isn't that some of the thoughts in our health, wealth, and prosperity gospel today? That those who God blesses those with great, mighty, marvelous things. That if you don't have lots of money and lots of cars, that you aren't blessed. That's a gospel today, a false gospel in our church today. Not this church, but in the church overall. Job would have been laughed at in the health, wealth, and prosperity churches of today. So Satan goes on in this conversation with God, and he says, verse 10, have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands and his possessions and increased his land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.
Wow.
The Lord said to Satan, behold, all that Job has, he's now says it's in your power, Satan. Only do not lay a hand on this person. Do anything you want to him, just basically don't kill him. Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. The next day, sons of dogs were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. The messenger came to Job. The oxen were plowing, the donkeys were feeding beside them. The Sabaeans came, they raided Job's house. And what happened there? It killed the servants. Killed his kids. Everything else started going down the tubes, it looked like. This hindrance came, these troubles came, these problems came in the life of Job. And look what happens there. And Job heard all this, and what was his first response to it? Do you see where it says, why God? Why? No, you don't see that in in Job. You see Job tear his robe, shave his head. He falls to the ground in worship. And he blesses the name of the Lord in verse 21. And in verse 22 says, in all this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong. See, Job knew the source. And you can keep going. You can read other tragedies that take place in the book of Job. And I suggest you do it. Part of your devotions this week. Look at this life, this amazing race of life of Job 2. Where's the source? See, Job knew the source. He knew it wasn't God. Because Job knew as he continued to pray and as he continued to worship that God would show up at some point in his life. That God would show up.
Yep.
In all his glory. And Job would know, as they said, my eye has seen. And he knew God would be faithful. So after you recognize and see this hindrance and these problems and these troubles, can you recognize the source? I was reading from my Noah Webster's dictionary, 1828, of course. And in it, there was this little insert, which was really kind of interesting. And we look at our world today and look at the problems and the trials and the tribulations and why has the world gotten to this point. And Ms. Alicia prayed about it this morning. And why is our world like it is? Why are our schools like they are? Why is there this fighting, this constant fighting that seems to be going on, this division that seems to take place? We've been pretty strong about some of our beliefs in regard to the Constitution, the Declaration, and how that began our country, and that those underlying foundational documents of our country, we believe they were birthed by men who were in right relationship with God. We believe that. And in this little insert, it just kind of gives you some interesting things about the value of education. In our school, we like to talk about education. It says, in Christian homes, the Bible is central, forming the basis of living. And it defines marriage, guides the nurture and growth of the children, educates every member of the family in the knowledge of God. In homes that value education, the dictionary has an important role in the intellectual growth of the family. Does your dictionary reinforce and support Bible study for your family? Or does it introduce a conflicting set of values or worldview? Maybe you've heard about this lately. It's been around a while. Having a Christian worldview versus, or a biblical worldview, a Christian worldview versus just a generic worldview. It says, more than any other book in homes besides the Bible, the dictionary has had a profound effect. Let me give you an example. Let me use education. Let me give you a modern dictionary. This is from a 1980 dictionary, pretty kind of modern. It says it defines education as this. It says education is the action or process of educating or being educated. A stage of such a process. The knowledge and development resulting from an educational process. The field of study that deals mainly with methods of teaching and learning in schools. It's a generic definition of education. Now let me read to you what Noah Webster wrote in his dictionary in 1828 about education. Tell me if this is any different than what you just heard. Education. The bringing up as of a child, instruction, formation of manners. Education comprehends all that series of instruction and discipline which is intended to enlighten the understanding, correct the temper, and form the manners and habits of youth, and fit them for usefulness in their future stations. To give children a good education in manners, arts, and science is important. To give them a religious education is indispensable, and an immense responsibility rests on parents and guardians who neglect these duties.
Little different.
Yeah. A worldview of education today would be that the government needs to run our education system and our teachers are responsible for teaching our kids. How's that worked out?
Not well.
One more. I got a few. I'm going to give you one more. How about sin? Since we saw in Galatians the idea of a little leaven, this idea of sin. Is sin the source of your trial, of your tribulation? Is sin a problem that causes you to be hindered? Well, here's a 1984 modern dictionary translation of sin. Sin, the act of breaking a religious or moral law, an offense, error, or fault. Sin. Here's what 1828 Webster says sin is. The voluntary departure of a moral agent from a known rule or rectitude or duty prescribed by God. Any voluntary transgression of the divine law or violation of a divine command. A wicked act, iniquity. Sin is either a positive act in which a known divine law is violated, or it is the voluntary neglect to obey a positive divine command or a rule of duty clearly implied in such command. Sin comprehends not actions only, but whatever is contrary to God's commands or law. And then he gives references, 1 John 3, Matthew 15, James 4. The definition goes on for another column in the dictionary itself. A whole other column of what sin is.
Like it got watered down a little.
Source of sin. See, if you're not a moral agent, a religious person, then you may not even have a definition for sin. Because since you're not moral, then who cares?
Yeah.
And now translate that to our quote back there from John Adams, who says our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people.
Wow.
So now we have a group of people, not going to name any names, but their mascot is a donkey, and they have this group of people who come against the Constitution. Why are they coming against the Constitution? Well, John Adams would say they must not be a moral and religious people, because that's why our Constitution was formed. How can it be, you prayed about it, inciting violence against American people? Saying, hey, if they're down, don't help them up, kick them.
Kick them.
Hey, if they don't believe like you, get in their face. Push them back. Impede them. It sounds just like what we're talking about right now. And this is not a Democratic or Democrat-Republican soapbox thing. This is just the truth of how all of this is playing out in God's Word. The source of hindrance. So what's the solution? Last part. What or who is the solution to your problems, to your troubles, to your trials, to those who are trying to entangle and ensnare you, to hinder you, to push you back? What's the source of this solution? What is the solution of this hindrance? Well, Paul mentions it. Back to Galatians 5, verse 8. When he says you ran well, who hindered you from obeying the truth? And he said this persuasion does not come from God. Why does it not come from God? Because God has called you. You remember a few weeks ago we looked at freedom's call?
Yeah.
This is the call, right? God has called you. Your calling is to what? Your calling in life, we said. So think about this amazing race called life. Your calling in life, we said, is to liberty. You're called to be free. You're called to be free. Your freedom for life, we said. We read the the translation in Romans 2 about, if therefore the Son makes you free, you shall be free indeed. From John 8:36. We reread that for you in the Greek interlinear just to give you more emphasis. And it said, if therefore the Son frees you, really free men and women you will be. You're called to freedom. Don't you find it interesting that we began as the home of the free and the land of the brave? How all of our history of our country was bathed and immersed in the truth written in our documents are so biblically based. So what's the solution? Well, we got to know the solution. That's why we started out in verse 1 and went to verse 13. The solution is Jesus. He has made us free. God is our solution. He is our strength. He is our fortress. He is the God of our salvation. He is the power. His power. It's not just His power who He gives. The picture, I can't think of a better way to show you. But again, you're at this storehouse. We talk about Give Me Jesus, that song. Well, sometimes some have taken that song a little too, I don't know. And they took that song and said, well, I need peace. Well, so I go to Jesus and I say, hey, Jesus, give me peace today. I got to deal with so-and-so. So I'll need peace today. Or I got to go to work on Monday, so Jesus, please give me peace. So you go to Jesus, who's the clerk at the storeroom, and he hands you over some peace. You take it, and then you go. Or you say, hey, Jesus, I know I'm going to deal with my neighbor this week, so could you give me some love, Jesus? So I go to the storeroom, and I go to Jesus, and I say, Jesus, give me a pound, because I'm my neighbor. A pound of love, so I can love my neighbor. And then so forth. You go to Jesus for the things that you think you need for life. When in fact, that's not Christianity at all. Because Jesus is the source.
Yeah.
Jesus said, God is my source. And Jesus said, hey, look, paraphrase for you, that how I live my life, ladies and gentlemen, is how you are going to live your life. Or you are to live your life. Jesus said, I don't do anything except what the Father does in and through me.
That's right.
Could that be a problem of our hindrance? That we still keep trying to do things in and of our own strength?
Yep.
Wow.
That we try to source ourselves instead of being God-sourced or Spirit-sourced. God who is love. The Scripture says what? God, He is the God of salvation. If He is our fortress, if He is our strength, then we have to have intimacy of relationship with Him. And in these trials and tribulations, as Paul said before, this race that I run this race and do not lose faith. I run this race with endurance. I run this race so that those things don't entangle and ensnare me any longer. That's the kind of race we're to run. This amazing race of life has got to be founded and grounded in Almighty God. Jesus has got to be our source. He is the solution to everything we need. That's why we said again last week, there's nothing more important than your relationship with Him. If anything supersedes your relationship with Jesus, you will be estranged from Jesus. Like you said, it sounds so simple. And I was looking back and I saw, but Paul said this before. Back in verse 7, when we were getting back in the beginning of it, back in the salvation defined section in the midst of deception. Remember when he said back in chapter 1, I marvel at you turning away so soon from him who called you in the grace of Christ to a different gospel, which is not another gospel, but there are some who trouble you, agitate you, stir you up, trouble you, and want to pervert, twist the gospel of Christ. Wow. We've heard examples. Just recently we've heard examples of some so-called leaders of our country twisting the gospel to somehow support their message. Finish with this. Read Proverbs again. This is so strong. It's one of those you just need to memorize. Proverbs 4:10-13. Hear, lean into, listen. Hear, my son and daughter. Receive my sayings. And the years of your life will be many. I've taught you in the way of wisdom. I've led you in right paths. When you walk, your steps will not be hindered. And when you run, you will not stumble. Take firm hold of instruction. Do not let go. Keep her, for she is your life. Lord Jesus, thank you. We believe that you have given us life. You have blessed our names, our very beings, our very lives. There's not a one in this world who was born and can be called a mistake. There's not a one who's here by chance in this amazing race called life. So I pray, Lord Jesus, that we would be aware of those things around us, those trials, those hindrances, those things that try to entangle and ensnare us, those things that try to take us down, those things that are not of you. We would see those things, that we would no longer bury our heads in the sand or keep our heads up in the clouds, that we would fight the good fight. And we would engage with all your power, all your strength, and all your discernment living in us. We would persevere and endure this amazing race called life. And God, that you would somehow reveal the source of those things that try to entangle and ensnare us, so that we would know the difference between truth and deception, that we would be aware, that we would be able to discern those things that might look good, that might smell good, but that are not of you. We've got to study to show ourselves approved in our Scripture. And now we're finding we need to know what the Constitution says. We need to know what the Declaration of Independence really says. And as we've been reading and as we've been studying, we'll find out the truth that there is no separation of church and state, for one example. Declaration, Constitution, Bill of Rights do not mention one iota, jot, or tittle of separation of church and state. But yet somehow, some way, it's become some kind of unwritten rule of law of our land. How can that be true when one of our presidents proclaimed that the Constitution was created for a religious and moral people? How do you separate that? So Jesus, we cry out to you in our last days, because we don't know when our time here ends and we go off into eternity. But we do know and we do believe that while we're here, we need to make a difference. We need to be a voice. We need to be light and salt to a world that's dark and dying. We need to lay down our lives for our brethren. We need to love our enemies. We need to do good to those that despise us and use us. But all that cannot be done in and of our own strength. So we've got to have you as our source. You have got to be our foundation. You have got to be our solid rock. You are our fortress. We need to sink into that armor of God that quenches those fiery darts. We need to be vessels of truth. So what is it around us that tries to entangle and ensnare us? What is it that sources all those things? And Jesus, will we totally allow you to source us so that you will be the solution to all those things, so that we will truly know this peace that surpasses all understanding? Will we be able to live this amazing race called life with that love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control? Will we, Jesus, let your Spirit, your Holy Spirit, live in us and through us, so that we can truly be your ambassadors for the world around us? We love you. We praise you. We cry out to you. Lord Jesus, for those this morning that aren't here, that may be listening and watching this morning, we lift every heart, every mind, every soul. Because every one of us can make a list of troubles and trials and tribulations. Things that just gnaw at us. Things that just try to stir us up and agitate us, God. So we take all those things this morning, whether we're here in the sanctuary this morning, whether we watch it later on YouTube, or whether we're watching it live right now. Jesus, we take all those things, and as a body of one, we lift them up to you. Whatever it is, work, school, trials, whatever it is. Addictions, Lord, whatever they are. Pain, Lord. Sickness, Lord. We lift them all to you this morning. We give to you because we can't do anything about those things. But we can surely let you, oh God, have your way in our lives. We can surely listen and lean into you and hear your voice and say yes to you. So we love you, Jesus, this day. We give you thanks. We give you praise. We trust in you, O Lord. And I love that Proverbs chapter 3. What a life verse. Where it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. And lastly, Jesus, we sum it all up with Galatians 2:20, the key verse to this whole book of Galatians. The verse that defines all of this for us, defines salvation, and how we can enter into right, intimate relationship with you. Well, Paul cries out in Galatians 2:20, and he says, I have been what? Crucified with Christ. Therefore I no longer live, but Christ now lives in me. And the life I now live in this flesh, in this amazing, I'm in paraphrase now, in this amazing race called life, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So what's the solution? Give yourself to Jesus. What's the solution? Stop, drop, and pray. What's the solution? Fear God as Job did and shun evil. Give yourself to Jesus. We love you, Jesus. Thank you for loving us first.